Coué, Gary, bienvenue à Nouvelles nationale d'APTN.
Coué, merci pour cette invitation, un plaisir pour moi ici.
You have just came from visiting Ganawagi Mohawk territory. Tell me about what brought you there.
Well, we had a couple of very important meetings in Ganawake. First, we met with the Quebec Women's Association, La Femme de Quebec, l'Association La Femme de Quebec, and then I also met with the Grand Chief. It was a very important conversation. We talked with the Native Women's Association of Quebec. We talked primarily about issues facing Indigenous women in Quebec, issues around missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, issues around lack of healthcare supports, lack of education, essentially the gaps that exist for Indigenous women particularly, need for shelter. But we also talked about their advocacy. This is their 50th anniversary this year, so they're having a grand celebration this May 13th, and they've invited me to the event, so it was a very fulsome discussion. Then the meeting with the Grand Chief was also important because we've been working with them for a number of years, and they have some concerns relating to their jurisdiction and ensuring that they have the ability to do everything they can to support their nation. So it was a very, again, an important conversation about issues within their community. And I look forward to visiting many more communities in the months to come.
You have no problem to speak with Anglophone communities, but how about with Francophone communities?
It is very important that I connect with them. I fundamentally believe in bilingualism. Bilingualism is a central part of the Canadian identity. So one of the things that I make sure is I listen, and when I listen intently, I can understand French. Most conversations I'm able to understand. It's responding that's sometimes a little bit more difficult. So when I met with the Women's Association, Native Women's Association of Quebec, I listened and I responded through one of my staff. We have people that represent the communities.
Okay, you have translator.
I do have translator.
When you do those meetings.
Sometimes I do. Yeah, I had a meeting just in downtown Montreal, and I had two translators. We were talking very technical terms, very legalized terms, so I wanted to make sure that the language is precise. But in most conversations, I sometimes don't need a translator.
In the last election, Mark Miller said that returning land and territories to Indigenous communities was a priority. Do you feel the same way about returning land?
Look, let's understand where we are, right? We are in, and some people may not accept it, but we are in traditional lands that are occupied by many nations in North America, particularly in Canada and even in Quebec. So the lands actually do not belong to Canada per se. Much of the land is not covered by treaty, and even some of them that are, there's many lands that are in dispute. So giving land back is not a benevolent move by Canada. It is rightfully returning somebody else's possession. So that is Mark Miller's thinking. I've subscribed to that thinking. I do believe that land back is an important aspect of reconciliation. Land is at the core of one's identity. Land, language, culture are so important to one's identity. And I think for us to reconcile with Indigenous people, to ensure that Indigenous people have control over their lives, it includes control over their land. So absolutely believe that land should be returned. There's processes that
how can you do that for you?
There are ways that we can do that. Okay. So one of them is through modern treaties. So we have negotiations that are taking place on modern treaties where land can be returned. In British Columbia is a perfect example. We have 5 advanced treaties where that's going to happen. Just 2 weeks ago I was in Nanaimo, British Columbia, where we returned a piece of land that was displaced from them for centuries. So yes, there are processes, and we go through the process to return land. It's not just we do it with our eyes closed. We do it after many months, sometimes years, sometimes decades of negotiations, and sometimes it's simpler. But ultimately, it's important that we recognize that the land that is not Canada's land needs to be going back to people who are the best custodians of their land, and that's one of the things that I am committed to continuing in Mark's legacy.
Gary.